So let's talk a little bit start going into gear and how we can use that as a tool in the winter. So let's start with talking about shoes. We'll probably talk a little bit about considerations for uppers, maybe some midsole conversation, and then also outsoles and kind of what we've leaned towards ourselves as well as what we consider when choosing a shoe. So what kind of thoughts do you have on shoes?
The biggest thing for me, and I'm sure for you too, is one, the upper. If it's really thin, your feet are going to freeze. Two, the outsole needs to have enough rubber coverage, or it has to have features that actually give you traction if the roads are slippery. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a dedicated winter shoe, but one shoe that I've really been enjoying using thus far this winter is the Saucony Speed 3 Run Shield. The upper, I wore it, I think it was like 18 degrees last week, and I had like a 30-minute tempo to do, and there was no way of avoiding the wind because I was going to do kind of a big loop.
Yeah.
So I wore that shoe. My feet were warm the whole time, like didn't feel the wind at all, because this upper is so thick. And it's not waterproof, but it's water resistant, which also helps it just be almost impervious to wind. The other thing that I really like about this shoe is the rubber coverage on the outsole. While I haven't had a chance to use it in like icy or snowy conditions yet, it's great on wet roads. And we always have sand on our roads because that's what they put down in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And same thing, like good traction on that. Besides like the Run Shield, which is designed for bad weather, any shoe that has an upper that's more than one layer, like even the mesh uppers, those keep your feet pretty warm. For me, when I run, my feet are rarely wet or cold unless I'm wearing a shoe that is just so breathable. Like the Endorphin Pro 3, my feet get cold if it's, in the teens or below. Same thing with like the New Balance Pacer. The mesh is so open, you definitely feel the wind. So it doesn't take a lot in terms of upper features to keep my feet warm, but I would definitely say the composition of the outsole makes the biggest difference in terms of traction.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's two considerations for me. It's either how does temperature dictate it, or how does the terrain, like whatever type of snow or ice is down that day, how does that dictate the shoe consideration? And like you said, I'm holding the Hyperion Max, and this is a single layer of thin mesh upper with holes that are completely see-through. And something like that, my feet would probably get a little bit cold in the winter. And I was going to talk about the Run Shield stuff from Saucony as well. Sometimes it's hard to buy a shoe specifically for like winter running or like an upper, but something like this, I know David's been using it in California in 70s and hasn't had overheating issues either. So it kind of, it's like, oh, maybe you can get away with it. And plus I like the fit of this better than the original one anyway. But
I agree.
I did a 10 miler in these shoes, and it was single digits that day at the start of our run, and my feet were perfectly warm and it felt great.
Nice.
It wasn't really snowy or anything yet. I do like the rubber coverage, and I just wish one of the things I look for now going to the outsole conversation is the more ribbing in the rubber, the better. So something like the Speed 3 Run Shield version here, it has some mild ribbing, but not a whole heck of a lot. But it's better than something like the Trinusa 14. So like this in the Glide Ride series, I've ran a number of winters in this iteration of their outsole, and it's pretty brutal. There's just nowhere for the rubber to latch onto because it's pretty flat and pretty flush versus having some form of texture. A shoe, just like a regular running shoe that I've enjoyed running in the winter and in general because of the outsole combined with a layered mesh upper, is the Wave Rider series. They just have a more premium, thicker upper combined with more ribs within the outsole. So there are shoes that you don't have to buy specialty stuff for that can work. But sometimes that specialty stuff is nice. Like the Run Shield is a really nice upper, I think, on all the models that they use it for. Sometimes when it's getting more snowy, I'll start to take out some trail shoes into the snow. So I've done that a number of times this year. So this is the Tecton X. So you just get and I don't like super big lugs for winter usually, but these are 4mm lugs. Max I like to go as 6. So I'll use something like that. And a shoe that was sent to us this year that I have 3 runs in it. We had a huge snowstorm and some of the ice, and I wanted to see what it was like. And you have this shoe too, but I know you haven't had the weather yet to do them, but it's La Sportiva. Their Cyclone GTX cross shoe. And so it's got a built-in gaiter with the kind of this semi-permeable membrane on the top. It's got a Gore-Tex upper. It has these it's what you'd want in grip. They're very sharp edged kind of, what are these called?
Oh, now you're making me forget to.
My gosh.
Lugs.
Thank you. The lugs on the bottom. They have very sharp edged lugs, which is really nice for even like more firmly packed snow, slush, or kind of the ice stuff. Having the sharper edges, I find, has been super helpful, and I really do like this shoe. And my foot has definitely stayed warm. When you have a waterproof upper, you just get no permeation of like heat going in or out, so your foot's going to stay warm. But I've also liked on the really snowy, like it was deep snow and slushy days, having a gaiter on. I would never have I've never done that before, and I don't know if I would be able to spring my own money for this shoe, if I'm being honest, because it's over $200. But it was nice to have that so that snow wasn't falling into the top of my shoe, because I've gotten home plenty of times in winter, and especially as it's thawing and there's a lot of slush, where my socks are just soaked because I've gotten a lot of snow that's fallen in through the top of the shoe. So this, from like an ultimate winter running shoe, I think that they did a fantastic job, and I love having it to use. It's just hard to pull a trigger sometimes for $200 unless you're going to use it. It feels like a cross-country ski boot that's made for running. And I appreciate it. I think the other thing that I wanted to bring up too in regards to shoes is midsole density, or not even density, that's the wrong word, but the feeling of firmness or softness of a midsole. When it's really snowy, I prefer something more firm. I want something that, because going on top of the snow, you're already getting kind of that unstable but cushioned surface. It feels really nice. So even having something like the Speed 3, I wouldn't like this on a lot of snow because it's already softer. Whereas this shoe, the La Sportiva one, is a really firm outsole, midsole. It's very, very firm, and it even has some kind of rigid plastic pieces that are inserted into the shoe. But I really like that when I'm running on a layer of snow, because it's not like I have to have two soft surfaces on top of each other. So I've appreciated the firmness of a midsole. Plus, foams, if they sit out in cold too long, they will firm up, which is just something to consider as well.
Oh, yeah. And we've all noticed that some shoes, the midsole feels completely different in the wintertime than running in warmer temperatures. So that's kind of something you just have to test out. And you might like a particular shoe in the winter a little better than you do in the summer, or vice versa. So it's just trial and error, seeing what works for you. I definitely agree that when running on snow, it's nicer to have a firmer midsole because it gives you better ground feel. Yes. You don't need something soft on top of soft snow. You need some way of feeling what's going on underneath your foot. Besides, I can't say that I want to get enough snow to test this, but I'm sure that it's coming. But in the past, the shoe that has really worked well for me on snow is the Saucony Peregrine. That shoe has the best grip in snow. Like, I've done trail runs in like 4 or 5 inches of fresh snow and had no issues. Like, my friend and I actually freaked out some people hiking because we were running in it without any problems.
Do you have the regular version, or do you have the ice version of the Peregrine?
The regular version.
Yeah, the regular version. Yeah.
Yeah. I have never tested the ice dot. Do you know what the specific difference is between the regular outsole and the ice dot?
Yes. I'll grab it. It's worth it. Give me 10 seconds. Fill the air with something.
So the Peregrine has a very, I think the lugs are 6 millimeters. Do you know, Nathan, are the lugs on the Peregrine 4 or 6 millimeters?
I believe they're 6. And what they do with the ice version, for those of you who are watching, you can see that they flatten out some of the lugs so they're a little bit wider. And then they have a material that's technically supposed to kind of like melt and grip the ice as you run across it. And the surface of it feels more like a very fine sandpaper is what the surface feels like. I have not taken these out yet, so I can't speak to it, but what they do with it is they replace some of the forefoot and some of the midfoot with these wider, more sandpapery type lugs that have some kind of technology that's supposed to interact well with ice.
Nice.
I wish I could speak to it, but the upper is their kind of run shield type upper, so it's really nice and comfortable, and right now is going to be the perfect time for me to try this because like I said, it's pure ice out there right now.
Yeah.
So I'll have to take them out this week now that I'm feeling better.
Yeah. And report back.
Yes, will do.